Awesome, awesome. Thanks, E, for the intro. Yeah, so today we're going to be covering objective design frameworks. And I think just to give you a bit of context as to kind of why this was a focus of mine. So Nona's been around for about 8 years now. And we primarily work with founders, focusing on getting products and software off the ground and building processes and teams around that for our founders, and ideally kind of make ourselves redundant within about 18 months. So a couple things I'm going to cover today are just some of my thoughts on design methods, data-driven design, user-centered design, as well as kind of the design principles that I've used that make up this objective framework. So kicking off into methods. So leaders of industry and companies with really strong design teams have put great effort into elaborating, sharing, and sharing their design systems, their workflows, their libraries, and best practices. You know, kind of open your inbox or just check out Medium today. There's a new best practice for everything. Now, I see a lot of issues with this. Kind of one, they're very often watered down solutions. So on the flip side of that, they can be very overly prescriptive, kind of implying that there's a right and a wrong way to design. And quite frankly, I just think that that's bullshit. They also give the impression that experience doesn't matter. You know, do a 6 months UX course and you know the methods, and now you're a senior UX designer. Now, the thing is, I believe that design is far more than just a purposeful directed activity. It's an exploration. And the thing is, when we become too focused on methods and things like that, we become too systematic and scientific in our approach, and it's very easy to forget the creative, analytical part of our jobs. So a couple thoughts on data-driven design. You know, in this cutthroat world of data-driven design, I think we've started to lose sight of something that we really used to cherish, which was the designer's instinct. You know, trusting your gut now means lazy, entitled designer. When we can ask users what they want directly, there's not really any room for instinct or guesswork. So the thing is that design instinct is far more than just your innate creative ability or cultural guesswork. You know, it's your wealth of experience. It's your familiarity with industry standards and best practices. And you develop that instinct from years of trial and error and learning from a lot of hard mistakes. So the thing is as well, it's like instinct is recognizing pitfalls before they become problems. It's recognizing winning solutions without having to explore and test endless options. You know, it's about seeing balance, observing inconsistencies, and honing your design eye. It's about having great aesthetic taste and being able to adapt your style on a whim. So I thought this may trigger some people, but I definitely believe in some instances, data-driven design puts metrics over users. And I'll get into that. So I think a great example of this is booking.com. Now, you know, you search for a hotel or a B&B on booking.com, and you see every single listing plastered with a handful of conversion triggers, and all it is manufactured urgency and scarcity indicators. Now, amongst all of this crap, I find it quite difficult to find what I'm looking for. For me, it's a terrible user experience. But the thing is that they must have such reliable data that says that this works. Conversion rates must go up with every chintzy, glitzy, you know, trigger they cram in, and the data says add more urgency, add more upsells, more. Now compare this to Airbnb. Their user experience says less. Just show me what I'm looking for. See, the thing is, while booking.com is chasing that 2% increase in conversion, they may be suffering 10% decrease in brand trust. So on user-centered design, I think in today's culture of design and design thinking, it's very easy to place your users on a pedestal. Now, the thing is, it's impossible to understand your user 100%, but you shouldn't feel guilty. It's okay not knowing that, and planning that is all part of the right approach. So I think often we never consider the user apart from what data we collect about them. You know, what are they like behind closed doors? What are they like under extreme stress? What are their phone habits? Where do they use their phone? Did you ever consider that they might use your app while taking a shit? Now, the thing is, when people participate in user testing, they'll instantly shift it from their natural state. You know, if they come in for user testing, they'll no longer be in their natural environment. They'll also most likely not be being tested on their device. And if it is by chance the same device, it's definitely not going to have their settings. So these are all real things to consider, because you aren't just dealing with data, you're dealing with real people. Now, ethnographic researcher Simon Salori has a couple really great quotes on real people. I love this guy. He's like an hilarious cynic. But I actually just want to bring up his exact quotes because I want to do it justice. I'm just going to read them out for you guys. So he says, real people don't give a shit about your brands. Seriously. Real people don't fall in love with any brands. Real people don't know why they did something. Stop asking why. Real people are no longer real people when they take part in research because they're being asked to think about things that they never think about in real life. Real people should only be used in research to help you understand their lives and their feelings, not provide you with answers to your questions. So another thing is that traditional user-centered design treats an intuitive UI as something that's completely unpredictable and that can only be discovered eventually, only through a significant amount of user testing and iteration. And for me, I've just always found this so infuriating because it kind of makes the whole design process feel aimless rather than deliberate. And worse though, using this approach requires a huge amount of resources, time, and patience, which a lot of early founders and teams just don't have. So it kind of begs the question, as designers, do we have an objective framework for analyzing designs? And what I started to realize is that I lacked an objective, actionable vocabulary for convincing others. And the thing is, everything you do as a designer requires some sort of approval. You need to convince your team, you need to convince managers, you need to convince developers, stakeholders, founders, everyone. So a large part of your design work is completely affected on your ability to sell your design and your ideas. And I think we all know by now is that the unfortunate truth is great design does not always sell itself. So even as an experienced designer, I still have difficulty convincing others. You know, our opinions are not always persuasive. And I realized that I needed to sell my ideas far more objectively. I needed to move beyond personal opinion, and I needed to stop having subjective conversations about abstract concepts. So, you know, what are the attributes that are required to make a UI intuitive? And like, what techniques and tools do we have for creating and evaluating intuitiveness? See, I think the word intuitive is actually pretty vague and abstract. You know, if you tell me my design is unintuitive, we can and most probably will argue about it. But if you say a certain feature of my design is not discoverable in a particular context, or that user feedback is misleading, I now know exactly what you are saying and what to do about it. And now we are no longer having a subjective conversation about an abstract concept. We are discussing specific design problems. So guys, kicking off with the principles now, and this really kind of makes up the bulk of this framework. You know, our industry is so fast-paced that methods and processes that prove successful today are probably going to be outdated tomorrow. So I really tried looking at fundamental principles that would stand the test of time and that I could apply to all aspects of my design. Now, a lot of these have actually been around for a while and have been mentioned in great books like The Design of Everyday Things, Intuitive UI, and I think another great one was Don't Make Me Think. So number one on the list is discoverability. And the question we ask here is, can users find what they need to achieve a goal when they need it? Now, because discoverability facilitates the first step of any interaction lifecycle, it is absolutely crucial for intuitive interactions. See, if users can't find what they're looking for, none of the other attributes or principles matter. Now, frequent tasks need a super clear, visually obvious starting point. Users need to know where to look and interact for common tasks. Now, more advanced and less frequent tasks can be less obvious, but take Google, for example. They're the king of discoverability, I think. Not because they're a giant search engine, but because Google's super simple homepage makes it very obvious what to do and how to get started. So a couple issues with discoverability is one very common one is poor presentation. Now, an interactive element has poor presentation when it doesn't look interactive or doesn't look interactive right now. Now, this could be due to a missing affordance that's only revealed on a hover or another interaction, or maybe like this mobile e-commerce store here. It just looks disabled or is too small that users can't find or don't notice it, like the Purchase Now button at the bottom. So another common issue with discoverability is poor location or layout. Now, the goal of a well-designed layout is to suggest relationships. Layout should create order and clarity. Now, if layouts are too busy, users might be overwhelmed with all of the options, and it ends up being like playing a game of Where's Wally? So moving on, number 2 is affordance. The question we ask here is, do users know an element is interactive and how to interact with it? Now, once the affordance allows a user to know it's interactive, it should inform the user how to perform its primary interactions, such as tap or swipe. Now, there are a hell of a lot of very common affordances that we all know. So, for example, the X over here very clearly shows close or exit. The radio buttons on the left very clearly show that something is mutually exclusive. And text with a frame around it very clearly indicates a button. So in the design of everyday things, Don Normus famously points out that even door handles have affordances. You know, some handles indicate pushing and some handles indicate pulling. Now, if the affordance is misleading, like this door that's got the exact same handles on both sides, the design flaw is often fixed with a label. Just slap a push or a pull on there. Now, of course, a lot of elements do need labels, but they should focus on the purpose of an element, not how to interact with it. Now, the goal here is to design an object that makes it natural and easy to do the right thing. Number 3 on the list is comprehensibility. And the question we ask here is, do users understand the meaning and effect of an element? Now, they should understand what the element does and how to make the right choices while using it. In practice, comprehensibility often boils down to speaking your target user's language. It's also about using appropriate icons, making labels self-explanatory, and asking the right questions your target users know how to answer. So, speaking the target user's language is an absolute requirement. Now, text should be a short, concise version of whatever you would say in person. You know, make it easy to understand, make it explicit and specific. It shouldn't under-communicate and leave your users guessing, but at the same time, it also shouldn't over-communicate. Skip all the details no one really cares about. Lastly, give it a good tone, something that's going to resonate with your users. Now, if the text is completely unlike you would say in person, rephrase it. If a word or two will add clarity, then just put it in the label. I think a good example of this as well is, do you ever ask anyone, would you like duplex printing? No, we say, would you like to print on both sides? See, the thing here is that comprehensibility is key, not being technically accurate. So moving on to the appropriate use of icons. So one solution to poor labeling is to use icons instead. Now, there is an art and a ton of guidelines to creating globally recognized icons. Users understand standard common icons. They will not understand your custom icons unless they are labeled. Number 4 on the list is responsive feedback. And the question we ask here is there a clear, accurate, immediate indication of what is happening? See, most feedback needs to be pretty responsive and immediate to be useful. Delayed feedback is pretty inconvenient at best and is probably very misleading at worst. So on interaction feedback, have you ever hit a button and there's been no feedback? And of course, what did you do? I'm pretty sure we've all had this experience, is you keep tapping away on that button until you see some kind of a result. So the point here is make sure people know an interaction is happening. Now, the reverse is also true. If users see some kind of a feedback, they'll think that the interaction is taking place. And I think a great example of this kind of in practical everyday life is the classic garage remote. Now, the only feedback that we have is the little LED light on your remote buzzer. Now, of course, what happens is you pull up to your garage, you press that, you see the little red light, you think something's happening, so you wait, and nothing happens, so you press it again, nothing happens, you press it again, and then all of a sudden your garage door gets stuck in open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close. So I think moral of the story here is to make sure your feedback is reflecting what is actually happening. So responsive feedback is super important when changing status, so the user knows the status has in fact changed. Now, these are usually success, failure, warning, on, off, I love you too. Now, responsive feedback is usually visual, but it can also be sound and haptic vibration as well. But the thing is, sound and vibration can be extremely intrusive. I'm pretty sure we've all seen that person, or once or twice in our lifetime been that person when notifications have been going off at a wedding or in a movie. So just something to bear in mind. Number 5 is predictability. Now the question I ask here is, can target users accurately determine the result of an action before they start it? So a couple common issues are results could be flat out wrong. Now, in this case, an interaction makes no sense based on any scenario or prior experience that that user has had. I think a classic example of this is the back button. The back button should go back to the previous page in the previous state. It should never clear all your fields and start completely over. Another common issue is when the user is confused or misunderstands the design. And in this case, an interaction is unpredictable because users just misunderstood it. Maybe the label was poorly phrased, or maybe that eggplant emoji was a little misleading. See, comprehensibility affects predictability. If people don't understand what something is, they're never going to know what it does. Number 6 on the list is efficiency. And the question I ask here is, does the design help users perform common tasks without unnecessary interaction or repetition? If it doesn't, your users will not have a good time. So very, very routine actions should require a proportional amount of effort. And very often I just see so much unnecessary interaction. Now, the date picker is a great example of this. Date pickers are great when selecting flights, or putting in your leave for vacations, which we can't really take right now. But when you need to consider things like days of the week, how long you're going for, and you're not really sure about these dates and times. Date pickers are not great when I want to put in my birthday and I have to click 5 times to select the right month. Just let me put in day, month, year. So another common issue with efficiency is forgetting or not using user input. And the bottom line here is that if user info is important enough to ask for once, it's important enough to remember and reuse. Don't make your users retype things. Second last one is forgiveness. And the question we ask here is, does an interaction prevent mistakes, minimize the impact of mistakes, or make them easy to recover from? See, intuitive apps believe that mistakes are very common and they accommodate for these very small mistakes. Now, unintuitive apps, on the flip side, are not very forgiving. and they result in loss and inconvenience, like forcing the user to completely redo a task. So first up in forgiveness is preventing mistakes. Now, prevention is always better than a cure. Now, a good example of this is the classic kind of button that takes effect on mouse up. We've all experienced clicking down on a button, having a second thought, and being, oh shit, I really don't want to perform this command. And now you have the opportunity to abandon that unwanted command by moving your mouse off and releasing. So now compare this to this delete button on this mobile app where it's an instant delete and it sits right above the home page. This is just begging to be touched by accident. And I think the moral of the story here is just put destructive actions out of easy reach. So undo is the classic forgiveness feature. Now, any app should provide undo wherever practical. Unfortunately, it is not always practical to provide undo, mostly because of performance and cost reasons. Photoshop is great. You can control Z like 100 times. Imagine every app on your phone had that functionality. Like, I'm pretty sure your battery life would just be chowed every 20 minutes. So, but we can make sure that every uncommitted command has an opposite. So for example, every OK needs a cancel, every add needs a remove, every forward needs a back, every accept needs a no thanks, and every open needs a close. So guys, last on the list is explorability. The question we ask here is, can users use your UI without fear of getting lost or making big mistakes? Now, an explorable app will really build your users' confidence and sense of mastery. They'll think that they've got this and that they know it. And an app is not explorable when users are literally too afraid to touch it. And when they complete a task, they shudder and they go, oh shit, what just happened? So an important part of explorability is confirming destructive actions. Now, actions with significant consequences should require confirmation and awareness. So now, a good example of this is when deleting an album. You can have two options here: right-click, delete an album. Now, the top one is confirming by asking them, "Are you sure you want to delete this album?" Delete album. But the second one below really brings attention and confirmation. It brings up the name of the album, Honeymoon Maldives. It also shows them the contents of the album. So 138 photos and 27 spicy videos. I'm pretty sure you're going to think twice about deleting that album. Now, the other thing is that over-conforming leads to habituation. So if you make people do this for everything, they're just going to very quickly learn how to go through the motions, right-click, delete, delete, delete. So a good example of that is if albums are empty and someone deletes them, just delete them straight away. They don't have to confirm. I think the thing here is that if everything is important, nothing is. And my last point on explorability is clear navigation models. Now, users need to be able to navigate your UI without fear of getting lost or stuck. Web browsers say the standard for modern navigation across the top, but modern apps don't need browser-style navigation. But there are some essentials that will always help with explorability. So we always need a clear, visually obvious way to the next step or complete a task. To return to the previous step, to abandon a task, and return home, where home is a very obvious starting point. So not having any of these essentials will result in users not being really able to navigate with a hell of a lot of confidence. And cool, guys. That's me. That's the kind of the 8 principles of the framework that we've started to implement. But very, very keen to hear your thoughts and any questions if anyone's got.
That was awesome. Thank you, Gordon.
Pleasure. Awesome. Yeah.
So I really like how practical and straightforward your points were. yeah, there's a lot that resonated with me personally. A lot of challenges that I personally experienced, and I think a lot of people here, based on the comments as well, can find a lot of what you're saying relatable.
Awesome.
We've got one question. So the question is, it's just, I think it's a question and a kind of statement as well from Loz. Have you read Everett McKay's UI is Communication? It's a great reference.
No, I haven't. I've read his Intuitive UI, but I'm definitely going to make a note of that one. Sorry, Iggy, what was that one? I actually want to write that one down.
UI is Communication by Everett McKay.
Awesome. No, I'll definitely check that one out.
Yeah, I mean he's brilliant at over communicating and communicating the structure of communication, if that makes sense. He's been in a few of the conferences. He's been in South Africa, I think 3 or 4 times. And he's definitely one to get in touch with. So not only for yourself, Gordon, for anyone else, if you want to reach out to Everett, happy to share those details with you.
Yeah, totally. I actually had quite a bit more of his content in this presentation, but I actually had to trim it down. But yeah, no, I mean, a big fan, hey?
Okay, awesome. We've got another question. Is there any method or way to overcome the challenge of not being good with language or wording in a system or app? And that's by Carter.
Yeah, well, I mean, like this is the beauty about this, right? Is you go, right, does it tick these boxes? So I mean, even with our interns now, we are pretty diligent about our peer reviews. All design goes through peer reviews daily. We check in on progress of everyone, including myself. My work gets peer reviewed. And we now have this framework for not only reviewing each other's work, but also kind of defending and motivating our design decisions with clients. You know, if they want to change something and it just doesn't make sense, you now have a very, very objective reasoning to, you know, have a layout the specific way that you've laid it out. Or put labels where you need to put labels and things like that. So yeah, I'm very happy to share these slides or anything if you think it'll help.
Yeah, please. I think please share the slides. I think many would want that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Then we've got another question, and this is by Catherine. Could you explain the difference between discoverability and explorability again, please?
Yeah, so discoverability is the first step of any interaction life cycle. So you need to know, so if I want to make a payment in an app, the payment button needs to be very, very clearly visible. Whereas explorability is about navigating your application. It's about knowing how to get back to the home page, and having those navigation models very clear. Does that make sense?
For me,
sorry, I never stopped you asked the question.
Oh, that's Catherine. She'll most likely respond in the comments. In the chat.
Cool. Yeah. Let me know if that makes sense. Or if you want to chat a bit more about that.
I mean, I think I actually responded yes.
Cool.
I think for me, discoverability and explorability, you know, it relates very closely to affordance. You know, of the element.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any more questions. Yeah, I think. I mean, if there's any more questions, please.
Yeah, cool, guys. Please feel free to reach out. More than happy to share slides and answer any questions. I think. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really I'm not particular. Like my partners are really kind of confident, strong talkers, and I think that this was also really about me as the designer, kind of learning how to motivate and defend decisions. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us have kind of battled with clients and ended up with products that we're really unhappy with, just kind of not being able to motivate for design decisions and kind of push back on those things. So yeah, more than happy to share.
Thank you, Gordon. I mean, thank you for sharing. Thank you for presenting and all the information. If you would like to reach out to Gordon, I mean, link up via LinkedIn. Gordon_creative, Twitter. Yeah, and if there's any more questions, I mean, shout.
Cool.
So thank you, Gordon.
Thanks, guys.